I used to think endings were loud. Slam doors, suitcases, a neighbor pretending not to stare over their hedge. When you're 25, heartbreak looks like a movie, and you wait for the soundtrack to tell you when to cry. At 40, I learned endings can be a quiet reframing of the room you've been living in for years. The same walls, the same couch, the same coffee mug with a chip in the rim, except the light hits the kitchen floor one afternoon, and you finally see the dust you've been stepping over like it wasn't there. My name is Leo. I'm 41. I manage a small design team at a furniture company, the kind that YouTube reviewers call surprisingly solid for the price. My wife, ex-wife, technically, though my mouth still hesitates, is Nina. We met in line at a food truck 12 years ago, both ordering the kind of tacos you can't eat politely. She laughed at the way I tilted my head trying to keep the salsa off my shirt and handed me a napkin like she'd known me long enough to predict my disasters. There are people who arrive like fireworks. Nina arrived like a porch light, steady, warm, something my eyes kept returning to without thinking. We were not dramatic. Weekend markets, dog walks with our beagle, Arlo, board games with friends who argued about rules like it mattered to the UN. We built a life made of sturdy things. When people asked, "How's married life?" I said, "Good." Not with the hollow cheer of a deflection, but genuinely. I believe that love, properly maintained, was a reliable appliance. Check the filter, wipe the seal, and it runs. The first shift was so gentle I want to forgive myself for missing it. Nina changed routes home. She said there was construction on Grove, so she started taking Baxter. The difference was 10 minutes, and she liked the podcast that filled it. She started keeping her phone on silent because I hate that little buzz, which was true. She used to groan at every notification like the phone owed her rent. She bought a new coat, black and sharp-shouldered, and said, "I feel like a person who knows what they're doing in this." And I told her she looked like the headline that convinces you to read the article. Then came the night our bank texted me, because helpfulness is their brand. Unusual activity detected. A small charge at a bar across town. I didn't know why it flagged. Maybe because neither of us drinks much. Maybe because the bar is attached to a boutique hotel that looks like a magazine spread. The text arrived at 11:42 p.m. Nina had texted me at 10:03. Going to be late rolling revisions. We are not wealthy people. Every dollar has an explanation. I stared at the notification, then at the ceiling, then laughed at myself for being the kind of person who gets suspicious over $38 and a tip. The next morning I said, "Bank pinged me last night. Did you grab drinks with the team after?" She said, "Yeah, quick one. New client." Everyone pretended to like the rye. Her voice didn't twitch. Her eyes met mine like they always had. If you want to know how trust dies, it's not with a bullet, it's with 1,000 reasonable sentences. I wish I could tell you I dismantled my denial like a professional. I didn't. I argued with myself. I tried being better. I bought the good coffee beans. I fixed the cabinet door that had been tilting for months. I suggested the beach on a Sunday like I used to when we were new. We went, and the water smelled like cold metal, and Nina took off her shoes and walked the wet line where sand becomes mirror. She looked so beautiful and so far away that I stood there with our dog's leash around my wrist and felt like a man waiting on a platform for a train he could see, but not stop. Andrew, a friend of mine, once said, "You can't audit your way out of heartbreak." He was wrong and right. You can't spreadsheet your heart into certainty, but you can follow a number until it tells you something you didn't want to know. 2 weeks after the bank text, I was cleaning the kitchen, and Nina's phone lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Mara, Studio. The message was one of those previews that gives you just enough to ruin your day. Still thinking about the way you looked at me when... It cut off, obnoxiously polite. I stood very still. I have always been the person who doesn't read other people's messages. It's a point of pride, and maybe a convenient way to avoid discomfort. I could hear Arlo snoring under the table. The kettle clicked off like it was bored with me. I told myself to walk away. I did not. I picked up the phone. If you've never crossed a boundary in your own house, it feels like learning a new language in a country that's not thrilled you came. Her passcode was the same. The screen opened like any other morning. There were messages. There are always messages. The thread with Mara, Studio, started months ago, and looked like two people who like the same movies and the same sandwiches and the same cynical jokes about the boss. It bloomed the way ivy does, quietly, until one day the brick wall doesn't look like itself anymore. No pictures. Words. Words are enough to rearrange a life. I hate the way she looks through me during meetings. You deserve someone who says your name like it has weight. I love the way you notice light. Yesterday, the way the sun hit your hands. Are we monsters? If we are, we're soft ones. I should have felt rage, but what I felt was confusion. Who was she in that complaint? Who did Nina feel looked through her? Me, the boss, the world? Was Mara a woman? A man using a friend's phone? A studio? My brain tried to find a version in which this wasn't about me while I was holding my wife's phone in my hands like a confession. I didn't confront her then. I became for a week a man on a balance beam. Put one foot in front of the other. Keep your eyes on a fixed point. Breathe. On Tuesday, she called and said, "Can you start the oven? I'll be home at 7. She came home at 8, smelling like the new perfume and cold air. On Thursday, I found a small receipt in the pocket of the sharp-shouldered Cote 2 cappuccinos, one croissant. The cafe across town she used to hate because the barista talked too much. On Saturday, she sat at our table and edited photos on her laptop of chairs my company had made, and the light caught the kitchen floor in a way that threw everything into relief. Crumbs, dog hair, a faint ring from a glass, a world I had stopped seeing because seeing it meant responsibility. I asked. Not subtly, not strategically, not like a detective on a show. I said, "Are you having an affair?" She didn't flinch, which was somehow worse. She didn't scoff. She looked at me like I'd told her there was a siren outside and we should check if the neighbors were okay. "No," she said. She held my gaze steady. "I'm not." The part of me that wanted to believe her was a dog that hears its name and wags helpless and hopeful. "Who is Mara?" I asked. She blinked. "A copywriter we brought on," she said. "Why?" I said, "The messages." The air thinned. She said, "You went through my phone?" I said, "Yes." I waited for my punishment. She sighed. "Leo, that's not—" She stopped and something went slack in her face. She closed her laptop. "I've been leaning on her," she said. "Talking about work. Talking about the parts I don't know how to say to you." It got close. It felt like a crush. I told her we needed to step back. I said, "Did you?" She said, "I'm telling you now." Honesty in that moment didn't feel like a bridge. It felt like a diagnosis. You can name the problem and still be very far from a cure. We started counseling, a room with a plant that had somehow survived the trauma of other people's marriage in chairs too low for dignity. Our therapist, a woman named Yara with a patient, expansive voice, asked us, "What have you stopped telling each other?" We said the easy truths. I'd stopped telling Nina where I wanted to go on vacation because I knew her work schedule would win. She'd stopped telling me when she was angry because I made reasonable arguments like a shield. We said the harder truth, intimacy, had turned into logistics, and we were very good at scheduling and very bad at reaching. For a while, the effort itself was a kind of glue. We put our phones in a bowl at dinner like a secular ritual. We took a pottery class and made misshapen bowls and called them conversations. Nina cried in the therapist's office and said, "I don't know why I need someone to notice me to feel real, and I recognize the sensation even if I wanted to blame her for it." She stopped saying late without specifics. She stopped flinching when I asked, "Who's that?" I started telling her when I felt invisible instead of turning it into a joke. Our dog, unbothered by the entire project, slept harder, as if his people had finally stopped vibrating. Then the roof leaked, not literally, the metaphorical one. The thing above you that you assume is safe starts to pass along the weather. We were halfway through trying when I found a second thread on her phone with a different contact name, K. No profile photo. The kind of anonymity you grant yourself when you know you're lying. I didn't go looking for it. It popped up while Nina was in the shower, and I was setting an alarm on her phone because hers is always louder than mine and wakes me up first. A preview. Can you talk? Then, I miss the days when you didn't have to ask. Then a photo, nothing explicit, just the corner of a table at a restaurant I recognized, 2 glasses of wine, a hand I didn't know. I sat on the closed toilet and scrolled and felt like I was learning that grief comes in chapters. Gabi K wasn't Mara. K was Cal, a photographer they hired for a campaign. This thread had none of the coyness of the first. It was heat and ease and the kind of vulgar honesty that is only honest about bodies. It was dates I could anchor to my life. It was lies that looked like my schedule. It was the night the bank texted in the bar receipt and my heart trying not to be obvious inside my chest. When she came out of the shower, towel twisted into a turban, she saw my face and didn't do the thing where she pretends not to know. She sat on the edge of the tub and said, "Okay." One word, a whole confession. I said very quietly, "How long?" She said, "A few months." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because when I was with him, I didn't feel like a person doing a performance of being okay." I said, "And with me?" She didn't answer. Or maybe that was the answer. If you're waiting for the part where I rage, throw her phone, sleep at a friend's, put all my sadness in a blender. This is not that story. I went downstairs and washed dishes we hadn't used, and then sat on the floor with Arlo, and wondered if dogs can smell betrayal or just hear the new pitch of silence. Nina came down wrapped in a blanket like penance. She said, "I'm sorry," which is a floor you can start from or a word you can hide behind. I asked, "Do you want to be here?" She said, "I don't know." It was the only honest sentence left. We separated inside the same house at first. The guest room became hers. We were polite. We texted each other grocery items from different rooms like roommates playing an elaborate game. We kept the therapy appointments because a calendar is a friend when your life refuses to be. Yar asked, "What would staying look like?" And we drew our best diagram. No contact with him, transparency that wasn't policing, time. Then she asked, "What would leaving look like?" Shui and we stared at the rug because it is very hard to sketch a future in which you are not the person you practiced being for a decade. We tried. People say try like it's one thing. Try was a daily choice to sit on a couch and talk about the lunch you didn't mention and the memory you didn't know would hurt. Try was sleeping in the same bed after 2 weeks and both of us lying so still we could have been puzzle pieces hoping to fit again by being quiet. Try was Nina sending a text while I watched and saying, "I'm telling him it's over," and me breathing so carefully you could have measured it. Try was me admitting in that small room that I had loved the version of me who was necessary to her, and that maybe I didn't know how to love the version of me who had to be enough for himself. There are always tests, stupid and holy. A month later, the clinic held a fundraiser. Cal was there because he shoots for half the city. We were both on the invitation. I didn't want to go. Nina said, "You shouldn't have to avoid a room in your own life because of my mistakes." And she wasn't wrong. We went. The room was filled with people clapping at a number on a screen like it was a finish line. I saw Cal across the room and he was exactly the same height as my resentment. He saw us and nodded, not insolent, not apologetic, like a man who has decided to be a chapter in other people's lives and learned not to explain himself to their readers. I have a friend, Val, who tells me to ask for what I need instead of asking the universe to infer it. I told Nina that night, on the drive home, that I needed the version of her who could tell me she chose me and mean it in a way that the next day's sunlight couldn't undo. She held the steering wheel and said, "I want to be her." I said, "That's not the same as being her." We drove in silence that wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of us had the words for. The end, when it came, was not cinematic. No suitcases. No crashing waves. It was a Tuesday. I was making coffee. The light hit the kitchen floor and showed me all the places I had been pretending were clean. Nina walked in and stood in that light and said very calmly, "I'm tired of hurting you." It wasn't drama, it was mercy, and mercy can feel like a blade when you're not ready. I said, "I don't know how to stop needing you." She said, "You shouldn't have to keep bleeding to prove you love me." We cried. We held each other in the kitchen like people who had run out of prizes to win. Then we let go. Divorce is a vocabulary lesson: petitioner, respondent, equitable, dissolution. Words that sound like a problem, set and feel like a wound. We split the furniture like adults who do not want to scar the dog. She took the couch. I kept the table with the scratch where she dropped a pan, and we laughed so hard we forgot to be perfect. Friends picked sides even when they swore they didn't. My mother asked me if it was another man, and I said yes and listened to her inhale like she was swallowing glass. My father said, "You didn't fail," and that sentence broke me open more than anything else had. You want to know when the emotional twist came. Not the plot, but the point where the story reached into its own chest and turned. It was 3 months after she moved out. I was in the cereal aisle holding 2 boxes like they could tell me who I was now. My phone buzzed, Nina's name. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I stepped into the corner by the oatmeal, where people go to make private decisions in public. Her message said, "I'm at the park with Arlo. He misses you. I miss you, not the idea. You." I leaned my head against the shelf and let myself imagine a version where this text was a portal, and I walked through and there she was in the light, and the sky made room for us and we didn't step on any old dust. I typed, "Where are you?" Then I deleted it. I typed, "Come over." I deleted that. I typed, "I'm glad you told me that," and hit send. I put both cereal boxes back. I went home. I cried in the shower for exactly 7 minutes. Then I stood very still and realized the world had not ended, and that the feeling in my chest was grief. Yes, and loss. Yes, and also something else I hadn't let myself name. Relief that I didn't have to go back to the part of the story where I was always asking for what had already been given away. People think the twist is that we got back together. We didn't. The twist is that I stopped auditioning for my old life. I started running badly, then okay, then with the kind of slowness that makes other people nod at you like you're in on the same joke. I cooked things I used to watch Nina cook and sent her a photo once of a lasagna that looked like a crime scene and wrote, "You made this look easy." And she replied, "It wasn't, but look at you." I boxed up our wedding album and then took it back out a week later because pretending it didn't happen wasn't the same as healing. I went to the beach alone and stood where the water made a mirror and didn't try to turn into someone else. A kid asked if he could pet Arlo, and I said, "He would be offended if you didn't." And the kid laughed, and I realized I was laughing too. Cal reached out once. An email. For what it's worth, I ended it because I didn't want to be the reason somebody decent lost his footing. It was arrogant and clumsy and maybe true. I didn't reply. People like to double the pain they cause by asking you to absolve them. I absolved myself instead. Not for going through the phone, I would do it again, but for staying as long as I did, for leaving when I did, for the days I didn't get out of bed until noon, for the nights I texted friends, "You up?" because I didn't want to be the only person hearing my breathing. Nina and I met one more time, not to negotiate anything, just to sit on a bench at the little lake where the ducks bully the geese. She looked the same and different. I brought Arlo. He pretended to sulk at her and then curled against her leg in a way that would break a person with an untrained heart. She said, "I'm seeing someone, not him." I said, "I hoped you would find someone who looked you straight in the eyes and didn't blink." She said, "Are you?" I said, "I'm seeing myself." It sounded corny. It was true. We laughed, and the laugh was kinder than nostalgia. Here's the part I don't want to make pretty because it doesn't need it. I'm okay. Not every day. Some mornings I wake up and roll onto the cool side of the bed, and the absence feels like a cliff. Some nights I walk past the cafe, and their lamplight makes me want to throw a rock. But more often than not, I make coffee and the smell is just coffee. I go to work and the chairs look like chairs and not metaphors. I run by the river and a stranger's dog keeps pace, and I feel ridiculous and alive. I stand in my kitchen and the light hits the floor, and I see crumbs and dog hair and a faint ring from a glass, and I get the broom and sweep, and it feels like care, not penance. If you're reading this because you typed, "How do I survive my wife cheating?" into a search bar at 2 a.m., here's what I can give you that isn't a commandment. You will not be brave every day. You don't have to be. You will make small good choices and some messy ones. Do not let your pride keep you from texting your sister for a roast chicken recipe. Do not let your fear make you a detective when tenderness would do. And when the light finally shows you the dust on your kitchen floor, don't turn off the lamp. Sweep, open the window. Let the new air in. The room you have is still a room. The person in it is still a person. You are not done. 2 weeks ago, I was at a friend's wedding. The DJ was aggressive in a way only DJs at weddings dare to be. The bride and groom did the thing where they feed each other cake and pretended to be coy about it. I didn't feel that twist in my chest that says, I used to have that. I felt a softer thing. A wish for them to learn early that love is a series of small, unglamorous decisions made in the light. I danced badly. I went home. I let Arlo out into the yard and stood under the string lights we put up years ago that still work because we bought good ones. I looked into my own house and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was not a guest. The next morning, the sun came across the floor the way it always had. I saw dust, yes. I also saw the grain in the wood, and the place where Arlo's nails have made tiny crescents near his bowl, and the outline of a rug we moved and never replaced. I got on my knees and wiped the ring from the glass. I said out loud to no one, "This is mine." Then I made coffee. I took the first sip standing by the window, and I didn't imagine anyone else's mouth on the mug before mine. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.